Hereby call this Planning and Community Affairs Committee meeting to order. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence. Please be seated. Where's the minutes from the closed session? There's no motion for that one?
That's the adoption of previous minutes?
Oh, that's for Planning and Community Affairs.
Yeah, that's the one on this one.
We don't have, okay. Okay, so, disclosure of pecuniary interest, nature thereof? Seeing none? Move on, moved by Councillor Drew that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning and Community Affairs Committee held Monday, April 10th, 2017 be endorsed. Any errors and omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item, we have, just looks like nobody in the audience. I just wanted to capture that, for Canterbury Common, just for the media, the press's sake. We had the closed session special council meeting called, and there'll be an official press release forthcoming later this week once signatures have been applied. So just if you have any further questions, we can speak after the meeting. Next is the presentations. So I also would like to add on to the agenda, which we don't have in this one, announcements from council this time. Councillor Somerville and Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is that on? I would just like to make an announcement that on Friday night, 3 of the Seagrave residents, including myself, went to the Sutton Spelling Bee and in Sutton. And actually it wasn't in Sutton, it was in Eudora, I just lied. And we came in 3rd out of 11 teams. And I'm going to ask you if you can spell, I have to look it up now. I'll ask you later. Because it was a hard word, and there was a lot of words that that were having difficult spelling. I think they pulled them out of the Latin dictionary. Anyways, we did win for best dress. We won for the 20th. We won for the Roaring 20s. So we did win flowers, but we came in 3rd on our spelling bee. And then on Saturday, the G-Moms of Port Perry, they held their gala over at Royal Ashburn, and they had pretty well a sellout at Royal Ashburn, and made lots of money for that's the grandmothers, made lots of money for the Stephen Lewis Foundation. I don't know exactly how much they're still counting that. And then on Saturday night, we attended the Sunderland car draw, and at the arena, and the Sunderland Lions Club put that on, and they made themselves a lot of money. A lady from Sunderland won the car, and we got down as far as number 20. We were the last in the last 20, but unfortunately we got pulled out. So, but it was a good night, and I commend the G-Moms. I commend the Sutton Library for putting on their spelling bee, and I commend the Lions Club of Sunderland for putting on such a great presentation for a card draw, and I think there were 600 tickets sold. So they did very well.
Was there a prize for best dress for that, too? Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to invite all the members of our community as well as council to the 6th Annual Muscular Dystrophy Canada Rooftop Campout. This ceremony starts this Friday at 6 p.m. in Palmer Park. There'll be boot tolls all weekend long, so make sure you drive up and down Water Street numerous times. This year they're calling it Drive for 25, and they're hoping to raise $25,000. And the firefighters firefighters that will be up on top of Harp and Wiley's for the weekend are Captain Ryan Edgar, firefighter Aiden Taylor, firefighter Jack Irvine, and firefighter Zach Newman. So please come out and support, drop some money in the boot. There's some silent auction items as well as activities for the kids. So hopefully most of us will be there at some point on the weekend to show our support.
Any other announcements from council? All right, I'd also like to take this opportunity to allow for announcements from staff, whether it's clarifications or items that need to be addressed. So, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to announce the Ward Boundary Review Open House will be held tomorrow, Tuesday, May 16th at 6:30 p.m. in the Rotary Room at the library. Presentation will be provided by Watson and Associates along with Dr. Robert Williams, our consultants on this project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just a clarification, there was some errors in the media there. That's why I just wanted to address that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that point, the paper did indicate that the presentation was going to be Thursday, May 20th. That was incorrect. So anyone was looking at that, Tuesday, May 16th, tomorrow will be at 6:30 will be the correct date.
Any other announcements from staff? I know this is the first time that we've formally done this, but going forward, we'll try and give opportunity for staff to bring forward any announcements or address any changes that need to be brought to the attention of councils or the community. Okay, seeing none, we'll move right on to presentations. So right now we have Mr. Allure, CEO. He left because the sun was in his eyes and moved to the front there. And we have Mr. Gary Scanlon from Watson Associates and to talk about the fiscal impact assessment of the Great Blue Heron and the casino revenue report. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, with me is Mr. Gary Scanlon from Watson and Associates, economist. He'll be following my presentation with an overview of his analysis. I'm going to provide a bit of a summary of my report that you have before you. In 2000, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation agreed to a revenue sharing agreement with the Township of Scugog and the region of Durham for revenues from the Great Blue Heron Charity Casino. That agreement was in place for 16 years, from 2000 to 2016. The township received 30% of the Mississauga's 5% host community share, and the region received 10% of that share, and there was a separate agreement with the Durham Regional Police. Now, the agreements were established to assist with the costs related to road maintenance, winter control, fire protection, regional services such as police and EMS, as both municipalities could not recover these costs through taxation. The funds, council established a community enhancement fund reserve in which to deposit the funds, and over the 16-year period, approximately $20 million was provided by the Mississaugans. Last year, the last 6 years, which you can see by this bar chart, fairly steady uniform income in the range of about 1.1 to 1.17. And as indicated in Appendix A of the report, the funds were used for a variety of purposes, primarily for capital projects ranging from facility expansion, recreations and parks purposes to infrastructure maintenance. And in this regard, the township acknowledges with thanks the generosity of the Mississaugans over the past 16 years. There's been some changes at the Great Blue Heron Casino. Negotiations between the Mississaugans, OLG, and the province established an agreement where OLG would assume the conduct and management of the casino. That became effective in September of 16. Those negotiations were ongoing for a 2-year period, approximately from 2014 to 16, and the township and the region were not included in those negotiations. And when OLG took control of the casino, the revenue sharing agreement with the township and the Mississaugas ended. In lieu of that revenue sharing agreement, OLG, based on concerns of the township and concerns of the Mississaugans about the loss of revenue to the township, offered a 12-month extension to the revenue agreement in order to develop a municipal service contribution agreement with both the Mississaugans on their reserve lands and OLG for the casino. At that point, in the fall of 2016, the township retained the services of Watson and Associates economists to undertake a fiscal analysis of the present costs of providing services to both the Great Blue Heron Casino and the Mississaugan Reserve lands. These were the terms of the agreement moving forward with OLG, was to be a municipal service arrangement. They had indicated a deadline of September 7th, 2017, and we have been in negotiations for the past year with OLG and the Mississaugans, and this, time was approaching, so the township requested a 6-month extension to resolve the revenue sharing agreement, and OLG has granted a little more than a 3-month extension that would take us from the September 7th deadline of this year to the end of the year, December 31, 2017. And this extension, of course, will allow the negotiations to continue and allow both the Mississaugans and OLG to work with the township to enter into a municipal service contribution agreement with the township. Now, as the host community, the Mississaugans will receive quarterly payments. They will also receive additional funds for the leasing of the facility to OLG, and they also receive a First Nations contribution. The quarterly payment this year from January to March was a little over $1.7 million. And then finally, just to wrap up my portion of the presentation, it's vitally important for the township to continue to receive contributions from the Great Blue Heron Casino. And without these funds, our ability to continue to provide capital infrastructure projects will be severely diminished. That's the end of my portion of the presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we're moving right along to Mr. Scanlon's report. Is that the plan, or to questions now?
I would suggest that we move to Mr. Scanlon's report. It may answer some of the questions council may have at this point,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. Is there a slide deck for this as well? Or okay. Perfect. Welcome, Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, pleasure to be here before you. We've put together an overview of the report that we prepared. I think it's appended to the CAO's report, so I'm not going to go through page by page or whatever, but I'm going to hit the highlights for you just to give you an indication of our findings and how we came about to go through the calculations to assign costs. We were, I think, the CAO's did a good job going through a lot of the background. What we were tasked with was to identify the costs associated with the township services provided not only to the OLG but also to the reserve lands, because obviously they receive access to recreational services, they receive fire assistance, they receive road clearings, et cetera. So we went through to take a look at both the costs associated with those two entities. I apologize for kind of the complexity of this, but at a very high level, if I can take you through, what we did was really break the analysis into 4 components. 3 of them apply both to the OLG and to the reserve. At the top, we analyzed your expenditures, and for the most part, what we did was distribute the costs somewhat equally across both residents as well as employees. There's benefits of having the roads or having fire protection, et cetera. There's slightly different levels of benefit between a resident versus an employee. But we moved through to allocate costs so that we could assign a cost factor to the reserve lands and then to the OLG facility. And you can see that we split it between residential, non-residential, distributed these costs on a per capita basis per employee, and then identified an associated cost. Now, I'll summarize this at the end, what costs we did assign. There's some non-tax revenues. Obviously, there's different types of non-tax revenues that are generated, different types of fees or charges that are paid both by the OLG or by the reserve individuals. So it's not a big dollar amount, but we want to make sure that we were appropriately recognizing those types of revenues that are generated. One of the larger costs, which is in the blue, that's to identify the capital facilities. Obviously, any service that's provided by the township, you do it through assets. So the roadways, you've got a lot of road assets. You've got fire trucks, you've got fire stations, you've got recreational facilities, et cetera. I think the report of the treasurer that was put forth, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $225 million of township assets in order to provide the services. So we looked at those costs. We took a look at their longevity. A road may last 60 years, a fire truck may last 20 years, a building will last you. We broke it into components, the roof lasts 20 years, et cetera. So we tried to go through and take a look at those assets and distribute them on an annual basis so we could reflect on an annual basis how much you were using up those assets. And then we took those costs, once again, distributed them across residents and employees, not only of the township, but of the reserve and then of the OLG facility. Those are the main costs. The last one is actually somewhat very specific to the reserve lands because there's a number of roadways that are within the boundaries of the reserve, and obviously that's how they get access to their individual homes or move through and migrate through. So we allocated an additional cost for the roads that were within the reserve lands. So all of this together really is how we come out to the dollar amounts that we'll talk to a little bit later in the slides. Just so that you see the magnitude of the 3 different entities. The township's got about 21,600 employees, about 21,600 residents, and then about 8,100 employees. And the reserve lands have about 90 population, about 40 employees. OLG, quite surprisingly, has about 1,100 employees, quite a large number. And then just so that when we get to roads and we're distributing some of those costs, we distribute the roads on a per kilometer basis. Per capita really didn't reflect those costs adequately, so we looked at it on a per kilometer. And when you take a look that there's almost 6 kilometers of land within, or roads within the reserve, we distributed the costs associated with that. So when we walk through all the detailed calculations in the report, at the end of the day, what we see is that the annual costs we would estimate For the reserve lands is about $268,000 of net value that they received from the township. And the casino is in the range of about $714,000. So you total that's approximately $1 million in costs for that. And if we take a look at the details, and this will be one of the very few tables and numbers that I'll present, I just wanted to highlight that you can see the operating costs that are at the starting point. For the reserve, we had about, we split it on per capita and per employee, so you can see that we had roughly about $75,000 in operating costs. For the OLG, it was about $460,000 of just pure operating costs. That's the day-to-day costs for the firefighters and maintaining the roads, et cetera. The next line is that's the capital cost. That's the assets, so distributing the assets on an equitable basis across all those who benefit. That would add about another $42,000 from the reserve and another $323,000 from the OLG. So we look at it on a pure cost, it's about $108,000 for the reserve and then about $780,000 for the OLG. There's minor revenues, like non-tax revenues. You can see they're not huge. It's about $12,000 for the reserve and about $68,000 for the OLG, and we've netted that off to come up with the net cost. As I've noted, for the for the reserve, we've added the extra operating and capital costs associated with the roads within the reserve. That would add another $172,000 in operating costs and capital to maintain those roads. So specifically, that's how we get to the 206. Do I hit snooze here? Okay. I don't want you to snooze, just my computer. Hopefully I'll keep it uplifting here. So that's how we get to the end, $268,000 for the reserve, and then, as I say, the OLG is about just over $700,000. So that totals about $1 million. One of the things we wanted to point out, now there's some extra costs I'm going to talk about, but one of the things I wanted to point out was the fact that if they weren't receiving the service from you and let's say the reserve wanted to provide the service themselves, there's a considerable cost for them trying to provide the service for not only their residents and employees, but also the OLG. And the roads we would figure that are within the OLG, we figure, within the reserve lands, we'd figure at best they would break even if they were trying to contract with others to provide the snow clearing, the road maintenance, stuff like that. At best they would probably break even. For the fire though, it's an essential service. The OLG can't run without that type of service. We attempted to identify the costs associated with it. At a minimum, they'd have to buy a couple of vehicles. We would figure a rescue vehicle and a pumper at a minimum, and then you'd have to have a fire station for that. So the capital costs out of pocket would be in the range of about $2 million just to equate that. Now, and then on top of that, you'd need operating costs for the fire trucks and running the station, and then the firefighters. We've provided for about 30 part-time firefighters. So in total, we'd look at operating costs in and around $800,000. So a considerable amount that they'd have to do to replicate this. And just to indicate, when we took a look at this particular service, we had a lot of information that we were able to receive from Casino-Rama, now much bigger, and they service a larger facility and some additional residents. And we stepped that down and looked at it on a prorated, well, not quite a prorated, but we looked at that information as kind of a guide to make sure that we weren't overstating the cost. So this is a considerable amount just for fire. With respect to Parks and Recreation, obviously they have access to all of the different variety of programs. They'd be able to provide some, but they wouldn't get the array of services you have. Obviously, with all the different sports leagues and, for soccer and for hockey, et cetera, it'd be very difficult for them to ever replicate that. So we didn't even attempt to cost it, but to identify that there's a significant benefit in the variety of programs that they have access to through the township. So that was, you know, as I say, we're trying to measure the magnitude. I don't think the costing that we've done is certainly out of line with what we just attempted to show you with comparators. We also turn our minds to if the casino should expand, so there's potential that they would add a hotel, maybe a bigger casino, and then any other type of associated amenities that they might construct. So there was a number of costs that we would have to take a look at in addition. Probably the most critical is the secondary access road. Right now, it's just one road that gets into the area, and at different times you've experienced problems with residents not being able to get off because of a traffic accident or some type of event on a road. So this is a considerable safety concern. You had done a study in 2007, and actually the First Nations made a contribution towards that study, which was obviously it's of interest to them to seek that secondary road. From the updated costing information that we worked with township staff, we estimate that probably the road itself would cost about $3.6 million, and then the land is probably at least $120,000. That's a small figure, because a lot of times when you buy land, you might have to buy the large parcel. You might have to buy my whole house rather than just buying an easement. So that $120,000 is probably a very conservative estimate. If you take those costs and try and translate it into a debt charge, we'd be talking $375,000 a year over 10 years. And then your added operating costs for that road in today's dollars would be another $75,000 in order to do the snow clearing, to do the road maintenance, to ensure that it's maintained in an adequate way. Fire services, depending on what they build and how much and how big, you'll probably need more capital. We identified an aerial truck. It was probably, once you start getting into any type of height, you probably need an aerial truck, as well with larger buildings that are spread out. So casinos have a tendency as well to be spread out. Fire Marshal has, on a number of occasions, required municipalities to get even an aerial truck just to get the reach, so that you know, in the event of a fire, you can access where the main fire area is. So we would probably estimate you'll need an aerial truck at some particular point. And then with that, you'll need a further expansion of fire stations. They're a little bit bigger, they're a little bit wider. You'd probably need to build a station for that. Trucks, aerial trucks, at least $1 million, depending on the size. They go up anywhere from $950,000 probably to 1.4 million is the latest estimate that I was just working with another municipality today. You take a look at a fire station, probably about $300,000 for additional costing for that. That would add, just in life cycle costs, probably about $50,000 for the aerial cost, $100,000 for the debenture payment. So we would be adding, those costs will translate into annual costs that'll impact your budgets. And then you probably have some additional costs for firefighters. So we've identified perhaps in the range of about $250,000 to $450,000. So that's the first. That's probably one of the larger expenditures. We have the roads, and then you have fire, and then once again there's going to be a broader impact on other services. Obviously, as they expand the buildings, you're going to have your building officials having to take a look at building permits. You're going to have planners taking a look at site plan information and stuff. You're going to have a variety of different inspections. So there'll be an added operating costs associated with those particular facilities. They may be partially offset by fees, but once again, we would estimate that those costs will go up. So I think there was talk from the OLG about a fee-for-service. I think it'd be very difficult to have a fee-for-service, i.e., every time we show up with a fire, we'll pay you. Some of the statistics we were looking at is on the reserve lands, we've had about 3 fire calls there. There's been house and then a couple of motor vehicle accidents on the reserve lands. Same thing with the OLG. There's been calls for heart attacks and that type of thing in the casino, as well as motor vehicle accidents. And then in and around the intersection with number 7, and then the road going up, there's been about another 88 different types of motor vehicle accidents, and we would perceive, given the high volumes associated with the traffic going up and down, that probably a majority of those operating costs are associated with the OLG. So this is information that we've discussed with the OLG, and to give them an indication why a fee-for-service is difficult if off their site there's an awful lot of accidents with people trying to gain access to that to their facility. So fees for services are kind of a difficult thing, so that's why we were identifying the amount of cost. Just to summarize, I think we'd be, as I've noted, between the casino and the reserve, we talked about right now, probably in the range of about $1.2, $1.4 million is the value of township annual expenditures that they get as a result of your agreements with them to provide those services. If they expand, we would expect that 1.2, 1.4 to increase in the range of about $2 million annually. As I say, one of the things we talked about, there's always the option that the reserve could provide the service. I in no way think that they can provide it at such a high level and with such broad access to the quality and the variety of services that they receive from the township. I think they'd only be able to cover bare minimum in many areas, and I think that the relationship between the township and the casino and the reserve provides a win-win to everyone. So that really highlights the presentation. I'm more than happy, I'm sure, between the CAO and ourselves to respond to any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation from both of you, and now open it up to questions from council. Start off with Councillor Somerville.
Thank you to both of you. That was well done. Nice presentation and brought us up to date. I really enjoyed listening to you, Mr. Scanlon, because I didn't realize how the breakdown was going to work, and that's really an immense breakdown. A couple of questions, and you probably know these, because I don't. Does First Nations pay property tax?
No, they're exempt. They do not pay regional or municipal property tax.
I thought they were. Well, what about the casino? Does the casino pay any at all?
No.
So they pay nothing to the township?
Nor the region.
Nor the region.
On the reserve lands, they're exempt from property tax.
Yeah, I thought I was right on that, but I wasn't quite sure. One other question that I have, you said, just blows me out of the water. Casino and the reserve, if our annual expenses are 1.2 to 1.4 million for annual expenditures, that's a lot of money. And then if they expand, did you say that would be increased by 2 million?
No, increased by another 600,000.
Okay, to 2 million.
That's
okay,
correct.
that's, yeah.
Yep.
We certainly have lots of comeback here.
To be clear, the operating costs represent, on this schedule, you can see that the operating costs are in over $500,000, or about $500,000 between the two. But then we've got all the capital assets, and they're considerable. So that adds about another almost $400,000, and there's some extra costs associated, another $150,000 associated with just taking care of those roads within the reserve land. So when you look at the total package, it's quite considerable.
It is. It's immense. But thank you for your presentation. I really appreciated that one. It certainly was enlightening. Thank you.
Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for two excellent presentations tonight. I had a question for Mr. Lohr. Our current agreement, is until September the 7th, 2017, and it's been extended until December 31st. Will we be receiving any revenue? Will it be prorated, in that quarter?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's been extended to the end of the year, and we'll continue to receive payments at the 2015 contribution rate to the end of the year.
Okay.
And we had, to be safe, budgeted up until September on receiving those revenues, so we'll continue to receive additional funds up to the end of the year.
Thank you.
Other questions from Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. Was there any consideration in your report, Mr. Scanlon, to transit, ambulance, and police? I know you said that they're dealing with the police themselves, but we as a municipality pay for policing as well, and hospital, things like that?
If I could just maybe help out with that, the region of Durham also was receiving a revenue sharing contribution and are subject to the same municipal service provision that we're subject to. So ongoing at this time is negotiations with the region and OLG and the Mississaugas for those regional services in the same way that we're negotiating. We've been in conversation with the region and have been collaborating with them, but they will be entering into a municipal service arrangement in the same way that the township will be.
So what I'm looking at roughly is $7 million that the band will receive from OLG per annum. So wouldn't we be better off to take our 30% that our old agreement was?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the 30% agreement, and it's a good question, Councillor Kett, that I'm glad you asked. The 30% agreement that the township had with the Mississaugas for over 16 years was an agreement that they entered into freely, and they weren't required to do that, as another sign of their generosity. That agreement's gone. There is no 30% agreement. There will not be a 30% agreement according to OLG. There will only be a service level arrangement with the province and OLG. And there's one other point I'd like to make, if I could, that the quarterly payment that I outlined for the first 3 months of the year is a really good payment, I would say, and I mentioned on top of that they received funds for leasing the buildings and also a First Nation contribution. However, there is a bit of an unknown with the Mississaugas, and that is they're uncertain to how their financial picture will change with the results of the OLG modernization. Now, the OLG modernization, of course, is the initiative that OLG put in place in Ontario, and the Great Blue Heron is part of what's called C3, which involves the Great Blue Heron, Woodbine, and South Durham, which yet to be determined that location. A proprietor that will operate those three facilities has yet to be chosen, and we understand that OLG will be making that decision in the fall of 2016 to have that operator in place for early 17. When that operator comes into place, their business plan will indicate and depict how the gambling will be divided between those three facilities. I mean, we're quite optimistic, and so are the Mississaugas, that this Great Blue Heron has its own market. It'll continue to thrive and do well, but from their perspective, they're still, being cautious as to what the revenues might be on a go-forward.
A couple of questions about, so you, on the financial implications, it says, this went through council in the fall? Is that what you said?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I indicated that a consultant was chosen in the fall. I
So
believe
did it come to council?
it did not come to council to award the contract,
All right. And it
but it
says...
is within the procurement bylaw.
And it says, development services, it was on their operating budget. I looked at it, I didn't see it, so I'm just wondering, the
Through you-
cost of the study.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the contract award was in 2016, and at that time, it was not, we didn't know that this was happening when the budget was done in 16. But there wasn't here at that time. But in any event, there are consulting dollars within the budget for consulting purposes that are being used for this very important job.
Okay, now to Mr. Scanlon, we have some figures per capita, and that's not per native, because I think I think we have 90 in here, don't we? Yeah, sorry. Isn't there 90? Yeah. So we don't want to work by per capita for sure. But I'm looking at my fellow that knows the roads for about 20-odd years. 5.6 is a little light on the roads, isn't it, Mike? Yeah, because I'm looking at Pogue, Hood, Carnegie, Island, Chandler, and Mississauga.
Yep, Mr. Scanlon, I think you have an explanation for
Yeah,
that.
through you, Mr. Mayor. When we estimated these, we took the internal roads, we didn't take the roads that were around the peripheral of the reserve, but we took the ones that went from beginning to end through the reserve lands. The ones that you were just mentioning are the ones that we were measuring.
And more importantly, Fralix, I forgot all about that one. But that's the only way they can get on and off.
That's correct.
It's sort of like, so I don't understand, like, the rationale behind the fact that you wouldn't add those on as roads, because if they didn't use those roads, they couldn't get to their houses.
We could have taken I guess we were looking to be perhaps a bit conservative rather than being,
This is our money.
I understand. If I can provide you with an estimate for that, and I wouldn't charge myself 100% of the road, but maybe cost share it. But once again, as I say, when we were putting this together, we were seeking to be conservative, and it was obvious that the ones that are internal are predominantly used by them. The ones that are around the peripheral are probably shared with others.
And Councillor Kelly, just want to be cognizant of our money in that. This is just, I wanted to make sure that we're talking about negotiations and with First Nations that was the prior agreement was agreed upon on a voluntary basis with the Good Nature. So I want to make sure, even though it's not what we had before, that we're very cognizant that the generosity of the First Nations and definitely the all the dollars that are donated through that past agreement, as well as through their other Bagwating Community Association, and we want to be cognizant on how we proceed, and we're being cautious on how it's done, and understandably that the municipality has utilized those revenues in budgets, but that is not to the fault of the First Nations.
Well, I'm not faulting them at all.
So
All I'm saying is that when we're taking into consideration roads, we should consider the ones that they use.
I was only bringing up the point of just saying, our money, it's First Nations is the host community, and that's been agreed upon with OLG, and that's meets all the definitions, so they are the host community. So anything that is worked around is through an agreement that's separate from any of that, so.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I was just bringing up the fact that if they're using roads, and there's no other way for them to get to their house, that...
I agree, I understand what you're saying, I just was clarifying, making sure that we don't, just selective on words that can't be misinterpreted, that's all. I was just helping you out to make sure that they weren't taken the wrong way. So, Mr. Allure, you were gonna add something?
And just further to that, the the provision for a municipal service arrangement with OLG is for the casino. We've appealed to the Mississaugan First Nation for a municipal service agreement for the reserved lands. There is no obligation from OLG to do that, and we're really, working with the goodwill of the First Nations community, and that because we don't have taxation, we'd like to apply that same service arrangement that we have been, that OLG has identified for us for the casino to the reserved lands also. So in that context, we feel really, the thrust should be with the OLG and the casino, and then we're working cooperatively with our First Nation community.
And I agree with you 100%, and I understand that the casino's our largest employer in Scugog, and I understand that that's part of my ward. I just want...
Okay, again, Councillor Cat, I'm helping you out with your language. The casino is on Mississauga, Scugog Island First Nations, and you say it's in your ward, but Mississauga's, as you know, is the reserved land. It's not in your ward. Your ward surrounds it. So I'm just being cognizant of the language that's being used, because, one misinterpretation of the language it's using, I just wouldn't want to see this as in any way offensive. So again, I'm just trying to help you out with articulating that and being careful with, it's not Scugog's largest employer. It's a largest employer within the area, but it's still on Mississauga, Scugog Island First Nation lands.
It's the largest employer on the island, how's that? Thanks. That's all, thank you.
Okay. Other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Drew has moved that the presentation be received, and before we go on, I just want to thank you for that information. I'm going to pull forward the other recommendation that's in the staff report. If you're gonna, I don't know if you're gonna come up here for it or not, but I'm gonna do that next. So any questions on the received for information? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. So I'm gonna pull forward 11.1 since it's here. There's a recommendation moved by Councillor Drew that was staff recommended that the fiscal impact assessment be received, and that the mayor and CEO continue discussions with the OLG Corporation and Mississauga, Scugog Island First Nations, and establish municipal service agreement for Great Blue Heron Casino and the MSIFN reserve lands in accordance with fiscal impact assessment of the Great Blue Heron Casino revenue report prepared by Watson Associates dated March 20, 2017, and that Premier Kathleen Wynne and the Honourable Minister Charles Sousa be requested to review and reinstate the revenue sharing agreement between the Township of Scugog, OLG, and the MSIFN for the Great Blue Heron Casino that existed for the past 16 years, 2000 to 2016, which is in keeping with revenue sharing agreements in other municipalities where casinos operate, and that the report be circulated to Premier Kathleen Wynne, the Honourable Charles Sousa, Minister of Finance, MPP Granville Anderson, Provincial Opposition Leaders Patrick Brown and Andrea Horvath, Chief Kelly LaRocca, Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, Regional Chair Roger Anderson, and John McFarland, Vice President, Portfolio Management, Gaming, and OLG. Any questions on that motion? No. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Scanlon, for the update, and we look forward to continuing negotiations. Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, we have Mr. Larry Dobo from Green Bay Community Association. Please come forward. As you know, just as a reminder, I don't know if the buttons are still flush or not, but you can move the mics towards you if you need to. Just as it's recording, we want to make sure it picks up your voice, and the button is pressed flush. So.
The purpose of the delegation.
Try it again. Just make sure the button is flush or the light's on.
Oh, just a little button there?
There.
How's that? Now, I taught for 36 years in high school, so I never used the mic before. Okay, the purpose of this delegation is, I'm applying for a $32,000
Sorry.
legacy grant.
the mic is very finicky, so you can just relax, like, have a
Talk there?
distance, otherwise it goes,
Okay, is that better?
that's perfect, thank you.
Okay. I'm applying for a $32,000 legacy grant. And the purpose of the legacy grant, you're only able to get it if it's a 100-year anniversary or a 25-year multiple after that. So next year, in September 2018, the Green Bank Hall will officially be 150 years since it opened up for the first church service in 1868. So what we're trying to do is to restore the hall to the way it was in 1868, and that involves fixing the roof, upgrading the electrical circuits because they need to be upgraded, painting the interior, repairing the stained glass and their protective covers, and we've already done replaced the board and batten, so now we want to go around and do the external trim, because when we fixed the board and batten, it made the rest of the hall look old, so. This application requires a 10-year lease, so it's the legacy fund that requires that. Also, the other requirement is that the township acknowledge that this is the only legacy fund grant that they are supporting in the community of Greenbank, and I don't think none of the other buildings are 150 years old, so we should be okay there. So, since 2002, we have had this 5-year lease with the township because we got a Trillium grant in 2003, a Trillium grant in 2004, and a Trillium grant in 2005. So, Trillium requires a 5-year lease, so we had to keep coming back and saying, well, our lease is only 4 years old now, so we need to renew it. So, since 2002, we've been renewing it. And the last time it was 2012. And the reason we've set up the Greenbank Community Association is because we're eligible for federal, provincial, corporate grants. And as you can see, we've already obtained over $270,000 over the years to fix up the hall and the park. So, the sample letter I'm requesting from the township, and I sent a copy to you, is that the township is willing to extend the lease for another 5 years once it expires in 2022. And the township has to endorse this capital project to commemorate this anniversary over all others in the community of Greenbank, which is pretty straightforward. The other thing is, every year, the annual grant for the Greenbank Hall for operating and capital improvement is $3,500, which we pretty well can spend any way we want, but I wanted to put in the grant application that the municipal grant, that the township would allow $1,000 of that grant to go towards the legacy fund application if it's successful. And the strength of these applications is based on the variety or the diversity of supporters that you get. So in the application, we have the Greenbank Community Association, the Greenbank Lions Club, 5 of the subcommittees of the Greenbank Hall Board are all contributing financial and in-kind donations in the grant. So the fact that the township is putting some money in there as well just strengthens the application. In talking to the lease, I saw in the notes that comment was made that there's no financial problems or no financial cost to the township. However, because of the conditions of the grant, we will be getting $2 million liability insurance, listing the township as a co-insured, and over the period of the 5-year lease, that will cost the Greenbank Community Association $4,000, ballpark. The other thing is, it's only $2 million because The Green Bank Community Association is primarily an administrative body. If fundraising dances are run, they're run by the Green Bank Hall and Park Board, which is a committee of council, and so they fall under the liability of the township. So the community association doesn't, in a sense, take on a lot of high-risk activities. It's primarily an administrative body. The Trillium Foundation calls us a flow-through organization, so the money comes in through grants, and it's allocated to the Hall Board, the Park Board, or to other community projects. That's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doble. I just want to start off by thanking you for all the service you do for the community, Green Bank. The whole operations are a model that should be replicated everywhere else, and also your work on the donation committee, the grants committee, it goes on and goes. So on behalf of council and residents, thank you, Vera, for all of your commitment.
I just have to apologize to council. My picture was in the Focus magazine last month, and unfortunately, it's going to be in next month as well. I was given the highest Lion Award possible at a recent convention. It's called the Melvin Jones Fellowship for Humanitarian Work, and unfortunately, my picture's going to be in next month, so I hope no one will cancel their subscription. Okay.
Well, congratulations on behalf of council and the township on your award. It's well-deserved, well-deserved. So, yes. Your certificate's in the mail. So you've asked for questions. We do have, the lease is later on the agenda, but we'll deal with the questions for the deputation by Mr. Doble. Councillor Betty Somerville's moved it, so Councillor Somerville and then Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion, if I could, but would you rather have some questions before I make the motion?
We already have a motion's moved here, so let's deal with the delegation first and the questions on that, and then we'll circle back around, because there's one here that's...
Thank you.
So, Councillor Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. When is the application deadline for this grant?
The application deadline, it has to be 1 year before the anniversary. So, that would be something like September 25th, 2017. So currently, we have a lease right now that goes to July 1st, the existing lease. So I'm working, hopefully, once this is approved, then I'm going to the insurance agent and getting the liability in place, because the lease also requires that the township receive a certificate of insurance with them listed as a co-insured. So I'm just kind of putting the paperwork together, but I have until September 25th to do
that's great.
these.
And you're not asking for any further donations from the township? You get your grant every year of $3,500. You're not asking for anything in addition?
No.
$1,000 is part of the $3,500.
It's a 50-50 matching, and I have commitment for $16,000 already, and then the legacy fund will provide the other $16,000.
Okay, thank you. And you said, my other question was going to be, were you aware that there were any other, going to be any other applications? And you said not, but how old is the church? Is that over 100 years old?
Church was built in 1896.
Okay.
So it doesn't fit the 100-year or the 125 or 150.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
So any other questions for Mr. Dole? Okay, so we have already, Councillor Somerville has moved the deputation by Larry Doble regarding Green Bank Community Association be received. All those in favor? Carried. And then there was Councillor Watton has moved and recommended motion here that Green Bank Community Association Inc. Legacy Fund application to commemorate the opening of Greenbank Hall 150 years ago be endorsed over all other applications within the community of Greenbank, and that the Township of Squealg allocate $1,000 to Greenbank Centennial Hall in 2018 if the Legacy Fund is successful. Does that capture everything there?
Yep.
So Councillor Watton has moved that. Councillor Somerville, is that what you were wanting to capture and then?
I would also like to put on to that one that we signed the lease agreement with the Greenbank Community Association Incorporated from July the 1st, 2017 to June the 30th, 2022, and that we extend the lease for another 5 years at the end of 2022.
So, Councillor Somerville, we're dealing with the lease next. That's the separate report that you've got
Okay.
as the
Yep.
mover. So, we'll swing back to that one as a separate motion, because that's how it's laid out.
Perfect.
So, okay, so Councillor Arquette?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just a little confused on the 150. Where's that come in?
Where's the,
The 150 years?
the 150 was the initial starting of the building of the church in 1867, but, I don't know how this happened in Greenbank, if they ran out of money halfway through, I guess I wasn't around. So what happened was, they started to build it in 1867, but the first service wasn't held until September 25th, 1868. And the other thing that's part of this grant is, in 2018, we're going to have an opening ceremony, and we're going to do a reenactment with Paul Arculus and the Historical Society of the original service held in 1868.
Okay, that's fantastic, except, where does the 1896 come in?
That's the church, which I have nothing to do with.
In
Oh.
He asked if the, Greenbank Church was eligible for such a grant, but they'd have to come through me first.
competing cause, but it's not an issue.
Okay.
Any other questions from council on that? Okay, seeing none, the motion was moved. Any questions, a final question on the motion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. So, we're gonna deal with the lease next up on the agenda, so there is a departmental report, 11.11, we already dealt with the fiscal impact of the Great Blue Heron. Next up is the Greenbank Hall lease renewal, 11.1.2. Mr. Newman, is there anything that you wanted to add? It is pretty self-explanatory there. Is there anything you wanted to capture of them?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think Mr. Doble captured most things there. Mr. Doble has already provided to me a document that lists the signatures of all directors of the Greenbank Community Association, indicating their agreement with the lease. As the report indicates, I have communicated with Mr. Doble on several occasions, and we sat down for an in-person meeting to flush this out, and he has obviously taken back to his association. So both staff and the association are in agreement with the lease. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, okay, and just before the motion was moved by Councillor Somerville, did you see the recommended motion that was there? I just want to make sure it captured everything that was required or was worked on before.
I'm sorry?
Did you see the motion that was, I mean, you've worked on the lease, so really it's just executing the lease that you worked on, so I just wanted to make...
I have copies of the up-to-date lease, and I've gone through it. I'm completely happy with it, and I gave copies to all the directors of the Greenbank Community Association,
Okay.
and they signed a sheet agreeing with it.
Okay, so Councillor Somerville moved that the report, the Greenbank Hall lease renewal be received, the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the lease agreement, and that the bylaw authorized the lease agreement be brought forward for adoption, and repealed as of July 1st, 2017, the former 57-10, after the expiry of the current lease agreement. So, any questions from that motion? Councillor Watton.
My only question is, does I know it doesn't reference the extra 5 years, is that just going to be captured in our letter? Is that going to suffice for the grant legacy?
Mr. Newman, lease?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the councillor. Item 16 of the lease does have a 5-year extension, so for a total of 10 years. So there's an automatic renewal of 5 years, as item 16 of the lease agreement.
$2, yeah, that's a good deal. Do you want the $2 today, or no?
Any other questions, Councillor Kett?
Is that gonna satisfy your needs, the number 16? It's an option, it's not a lease.
Everything's fine because this comes into effect July 1st.
No, but you're saying that you need a 10-year lease. So, an option isn't regarding a lease.
I spoke to the Legacy people, and they said a 5+5 is fine as long as there was an indication from the township in a letter that they would extend the lease after the 5 years. And so that's part of that letter, that sample letter that I made up.
Okay, I mean, it does mention the rate, so that's okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
as long as it's good for you.
That's good for me. Just one comment, I have a 10-year lease from the Township of Brock, and it's only $1. Sorry,
Oh, yeah.
inflation.
So,
Okay, am I free to go?
we're just gonna vote on it now.
Okay.
But, the letter, are you needing this letter to submit with it? It's gonna be all captured in the motions here, but we can just reiterate it with the letter and attach the motions
Yeah.
when they're done.
If that
Okay.
comes to me, I can work with
Okay.
JP and get that documentation,
All right.
sure.
And I think the lease was $2 each way, so doesn't it net out to zero?
Yeah.
So it is a better deal than Brock, so.
I saw that. So I'm saving up for July 1st.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Thanks again, Mr. Doble.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure working with the township.
Thanks. Next up is the Brock's parking lot. Mr. Newman, 11.1.3. Again, it was a wholesome report, but maybe you want to highlight some of the summary points?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. Yeah, the report essentially speaks for itself. At the request of Maria and Julie Brock, Paul Allure, CAO, and myself met with them and went over the lease. Essentially, they wanted minor wording changes to the lease where it indicates if council do pass a bylaw, well, we have now passed a bylaw, so little things like that. The most significant changes identified in my report are simply that they did ask for a one-year extension on top of the current lease, so there'd be an automatic renewal at the end of April 30, 2018, whereas the original lease had said that would be the end, and essentially that was the most significant change. There were some minor changes. There were some requests with regards to maintenance, which has been referred to Mr. Donnelly in our operations division, who's been working with the Brocks in that situation. But in terms of the lease itself, very minor wording changes. Staff have no issue with changes and respectfully recommend that it be approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for that update, and this is great for the township because it secures that much longer parking available for the general public and the business owners that are around there in that area. So also wanted to point out that Ms. Coleman is absent today, but in her absence she has Mr. Donnelly here who can also answer any questions that are pertaining to this agreement if one should arise. So we have it moved by Councillor Guido that the amendment be received and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the amended agreement, A.W. Brock's Department Store Limited, in the form of as attachment 1 to the report, Corp. 2017-020, and that a bylaw to amend Schedule B to bylaw 18-16 be brought forward for adoption. So questions on this? Councillor Somerville.
I'm sorry for my ignorance, but I just don't know, where's the boundary lines for the Brock parking lot? And do they own behind the post office?
Mr. Donnelly has I know there was a map there, but he'll answer it more wholesomely.
If you're familiar with the area behind the post office at all, there's 10 meters from the south wall of the post office going to that hydro pole that everybody can likely relate to. So from that hydro pole going south to the south curb line is the limit of the lot. From the fence on the east side over to the curbstones on the west side.
Were you asking what the township's lot was, or the Brock's lot?
Some of the Brock's lot. They own the whole piece there?
No, I thought you were talking about it in its entirety. No, it's just the, east portion of it, starting at that post and going south again, though.
At the hydro post going
Yes.
south, okay.
So basically half.
Yeah.
Half the township owned, half is Brock's, and the post office has several spots just directly behind them.
Yeah, I'd say there's 10 or 15 meters from that loading dock going south.
And then the municipality owns the other part, the west part?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's what I wondered.
All right, any other questions, Councillor Watton?
Does post office also own along the, west side, where their vehicles are always parked? Of
The
the
west
building,
side
the
of-
west
west-
side, like of Dana's?
That's,
You know, the driveway, and then
Yeah.
there's, yeah, do they own that?
no, they don't,
Really?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, motion was moved. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now we're moving on to correspondence, and we have, just to clarify for the benefit of council, based on a request that any correspondence that we receive that is seeking some sort of support or endorsement will be separated with a separate title, so that staff is not selectively choosing what they think should be supported, what shouldn't be. It's just if the correspondence is requesting that, then it's separated with a separate title, and then the general correspondence that might be received for information. So right now, all of them are received for information, unless council wishes to pull one specifically, or introduce an endorsement motion, or referring motion, etc. So, having said that, I need a mover for all the correspondence to be received, unless there's any that are going to be separately done. So, Councillor Watton, any items that want to be pulled? Seeing none? All those in favor? Carried. Is this correct? We're motion to adjourn? Haven't missed anything? All right, motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Guido. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
This is, we're getting
Great council.
faster and faster.
Kids are awake still. Still isn't coming on.